Oops.
Greetings, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White. I'm so grateful to be here with you guys. You guys are always fabulous. We always have a great time, whether we're talking about grit or equity. And here we are again with another powerful episode. So before I introduce you to this rock star that is with me, I want to first make some announcements, okay? First things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast, it will be featured on the X Factor EDU Network podcast with Dr. Matthew Joseph. Thank you, Dr. Matthew, for the opportunity. Thank you for the tribe. And when you guys get a chance, feel free to go and visit the X Factor EDU Network to see all of the great things going on there. There's a newsletter. There's also this podcast. There are some books from all of us that are going to be featured in that area. So take advantage of that, okay? I also want to encourage you to follow me on social media when you get a chance. Okay, my Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn, which is my favorite, The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. So take a moment, screenshot it, whatever you got to do. Follow me and I'll follow you back. I'll be connected with you. Looking forward to working with you guys. I'm super excited about some future opportunities. I also want to remind you that whenever you get a chance, please hop on over to my website, www.india-white.com, if you're interested in some books or blogs, or to schedule me for a speaking event, a coaching event, or even professional development. I'm here for you. Now, I am super excited about this show because when we are on the Grit and Equity podcast, our goal is to talk about efforts of closing the achievement gap, what works, what doesn't work. And like I say always, are you trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues, or are your students just not motivated to work? Then this is the podcast for you today. So with that said, I am so honored that a friend, a tribe member, referred me to this phenomenal rock star. And I don't want to steal any thunder from her. I'm going to just say that Dr. Berry is definitely doing the work and has proven to be faithful and has proven to have results. So with that said, I'm going to now introduce to you guys Dr. Almitra Berry, a principal consultant, entrepreneur. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Berry.
Thank you for having me, Dr. India.
It's a high honor. OMG. So listen, I'm super excited because I've read about you. I know about you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I always say I'm just a little brown-skinned girl from Stockton, California, who fell
California
on
now.
who fell on a path sort of against my will, but a path that worked in a way that has allowed me to serve a countless number of children over the last 20, I hate it when I count, 22 years now. I have a couple of numbers that I keep in my head. One is that over those 22 years, I've worked with more than 750 school systems across the United States. I have been to all but 5 states, and I can still name them.
Really?
Yes.
Which states have you not been to?
North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, Connecticut, and Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've been to Massachusetts. I haven't been to the other ones either, and I have plenty more to go. So
yeah. Now, those are the ones I have not worked in.
Okay.
So I have touched at least one school in all of the other states, plus Canada, the Caribbean. It has been an amazing journey. And so, when you talk about grit and equity, a lot of times we think that what we see in our systems is unique to our systems. And honey, let me tell you, it's not.
Wow.
It's not. It doesn't matter where we are. I see the same challenges over and over and over. And so that's sort of what keeps me going in this work. Although I am ready. I keep saying I'm ready to start sitting down some and letting you younger folk take the wheel. But I know that I was raised to believe that we have to continue to support as you say, our tribe. And so I'm here to continue doing that. Aside from the work that I've done with schools and school systems, I do a lot of work with educational publishers, content providers, because it's not just what we do in the classroom, but the materials that we get in our hands. And so one of the places to start making sure that things look right, sound right, or presented correctly is with working with those big content developers. So I'm pleased to do that work. I just finished working or doing the equity review for a new K-12 science program for one of the big three publishers. I've just finished recently a middle school literacy curriculum in doing the work to support multilingual learners. And I use that term very specifically because we're not just talking about our kids who come from other countries and don't speak English at all, but I work very carefully to make sure that we're talking about our Black children who speak African American vernacular, our Chicano learners who speak Chicano English. And believe it or not, even up in the hills of Appalachia, where the Appalachian English speakers don't speak the English of school. So, really working with multilingualism. I've got a book off to the publishers. My last book is there on the shelf.
Oh, really?
Affecting Change for Cultural.
Bring it. What is it?
See if I can do this without tearing something up. So that's actually the first copyright from 2011, I believe. During COVID, I figured it was time to bring it up to date. I had time to sit down and read my work from, 15 years ago. And I was like, ooh, this needs a little bit of help. So much has changed. So this was about an 80% rewrite of that original text. So Affecting Change for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners. Last week, I sent to my publisher the final draft of Affecting Change for Equitable Instruction. We're hoping that should be coming out in the fall, and it is filled with things like how do we look at equity when it comes to grading, when it comes to the assessments that we use in our classroom and setting up the culture of our classroom, the language we use, the conversations we have with parents. So it is packed with strategies. And I say that's the title, but I'm not sure. They have to get all this legal stuff on the title before that's done. But it'll be Affecting Change something or another, most likely. But you can follow me on social and find that out. And then I am starting, because I don't have enough to do, I just got a contract to write a book on sociocultural languages and strategies we can use in the classroom to address all of those that I talked about before, plus some others like Hawaiian Pidgin, Jamaican Patois, all of the rich languages that we see across our country, but we too often tend to demonize it and say it's lesser than, or it's not sufficient, or it's not right. Our kids need to speak proper English. And I said, I would watch my language. I call malarkey on that, because we all have to have the ability to be multilingual, to speak in our communities at home as well as in the business and school. So that's me in a nutshell.
So to all of my fans and all of you rock stars out there that watch me week after week, this has been like hitting the lottery for me. I don't think I've ever had so much synergy through a podcast that I'm just like, I'm literally talking to somebody that gets it. You are literally like the walking example of what we're trying to do when we're talking about implementing equitable practices, like really results, finding the solutions. I love how you spoke about all of the different types of languages and speaking those specific languages in order to operate into the community. Equity is not just a check the box, one and done. This is a way of life. And I'm just so thankful that you said this. Now, I want to talk with you a little bit more about your journey and how you got here. Now, I always talk about how equity, NCTM, National Council of Teachers in Mathematics, said that it's providing resources and accommodations as needed to promote access and attainment for all learners. How did you start on your journey to implementing equitable practices? When did the light bulb say?
Can I say one more thing, and then I'll go right to that? And as I forgot to say, I also do a podcast.
Oh, you do?
Educational Equity Emancipation. It's everywhere you get your podcast. Anyhow, so My journey to equity. I went into teaching sort of kicking and screaming. It was not what I wanted to do when I got out of college. I was very happy working in politics at the time, not being a politician, but on staff, until I realized that I was going to probably have to job hunt every 4 years. And in order to come home after college, my mother said I had to take the teacher's exam and get a credential. My mother's an educator, now
Okay.
retired. And so I said, yeah, whatever. So I took the test and I tucked that little piece of paper away. But ultimately, I ended up in the classroom. I had two children. It was hard to keep those work hours in corporate America. And I really fell in love with my children, but saw immediately that there were tremendous inequities. And at the time, I couldn't even name it as inequity. I just knew it wasn't
Yeah.
right. So, short path. A few years after I began teaching, I ended up teaching or chose to, let me word this correctly, I chose to teach in the lowest SES area of my community. And I went to a school that was located in a federal housing project. My kids were all, and this is in California, I now live in Houston, Texas, but my kids were all Black, brown, and Southeast Asian. One year I had a white kid. His name was Patrick, and I write about him in my book because every time I think about him, he makes me cry. And I'm not going to tell that story today because I don't want to cry. But my kids, and I was teaching sixth grade, my kids couldn't read. They could, I was facing a classroom of 25 children. 2 were close to grade level, and that was it. And so I cried, I prayed, I cried, I struggled. And in time, I was introduced to a methodology and a curriculum that, I didn't want to use because I didn't think I needed that much help. I was a pretty good teacher, plenty of ego. But my peers in my grade level said, we have to do this because our kids we can't keep sending kids on that are failing. And that we know if they're leaving sixth grade and they're reading at a first or second grade level, given the community we were in, we saw a couple of paths. We saw jail, we saw death on the streets. And I had kids that were coming into my classroom on Monday morning after they'd been out in the fields working with their parents over the weekend. That was not what I wanted for any of the children that sat in my classroom. So, kicking and screaming again, I went ahead and did this. And what I saw in terms of growth and change in my kids, and they learned how to read, and we were doing all these wonderful things that was just so fulfilling, was great. And so we did that, and I became a coach and was doing some stuff at the state level. And then our district decided that something was wrong because our kids in our school should not be working that well. They should not be achieving at that grade level, right? Why all of a sudden, after 20 years of failing test scores in the school, are we seeing achievement? And they took it away because they didn't like the methodology.
Wait.
Yes.
Wait. So because
Yes.
of the results, so they didn't want the results.
No.
So it's the big game.
Yeah, it was, and that really was, ticked me off, to put it politely.
Yeah.
And so I called the publisher, and I said, I need a job because I know that this works, but my district's taking it away, and I am not going to teach that curriculum that they're telling me I now have to use. And I was lucky enough, they hired me and I became a first working at the state level as a consultant, then at the national level, which is how I ended up working in 45 states across the country. And I did that for 16 years until once again, they said I couldn't say the things I needed to say. And
so
but what I saw in my district that made me leave, I saw over and over and over in the work that I did around the country. We'd get in there, we'd do great things, we'd see these gains, kids were doing well, and someone at a district office would say, well, we don't like that method. You all must be cheating. Or we'd have teachers who would say, I don't want to do that. And so it drives me nuts that it seems it's never about our children, but about what we as adults like and what we want to do or what we don't want to do. Instead of let's make sure all our children can read, write, think, and calculate on time, on grade level, and choose their life outcomes.
Right.
And so ultimately, biting my tongue doesn't work. I hung out my own shingle, started my own business. I can say what I want to say. I can write what needs to be written. I can work with systems that truly want to change.
Truly want to change. Now, listen, you talked about how basically your hands were tied and there's been some, uproar going on that we all know about nationwide that would try to interfere with this good work. And take us backwards. So with that said, how have you and your team been able to still push forward in spite of all of the noise? And how have you been able to combat when they're trying to silence you?
I don't silence well. I just don't. I say that I see every challenge as an opportunity to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So if you tell me I can't do this, that's fine. That's fine. I maybe can't do this with you this way, but I can go over here and get the same message out, right? I find alternative pathways. So that's what I've done. When I was told I was contracted to write articles for an organization, and when I was told at one point you can't use the equity word, it's like, but you hired me to write about equity. So how am I supposed to deliver? Yeah, I can't adhere to my contract and write about what you want me to write about without using the E word, equity, without using the D word, diversity, without using the I word, inclusion. So I said, okay. And I took my article and I self-published it.
Good for you. Exactly.
I have been greeted in a place, and I'm not even going to name the state. And I jokingly say it was everything but pitchforks, where they wanted to shut down an effort to just do an audit to see where their inequities in a system lied.
Because it would have revealed too much. Too much. You know, and it's funny when the wisdom that you have to know who you can help and then when to say my season here is done. I've got to keep moving forward. And so what advice do you have to educators that are facing the pushback and facing the closed door and facing those that are saying DEI must die and things like that? What advice, what tools do you have for them so that they can continue?
So this is almost a tease for, I think it's going to be episode 86 or 87 on my podcast because I just recorded it and sent it. But one of the things I said is that they maybe can ban a book. They're banning lots of books. Everything but burn the books. They can tell you can't say race. You can't talk about gender. You can't say, I know you're in Florida, can't say gay. Right? None of that that woke talk. They don't know what woke is. But that would require them to get an education in the Black experience to understand the origins of wokeness.
Right. Okay. So listen, we don't know what woke is. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking about what the definition of woke is and how this term even came about and how wokeness is not being Black? Like, I'm sorry. Can you elaborate on what the definition of woke is?
Yes, I can. So you got to go back to the times under Jim Crow when we were not allowed to stay in hotels, right? If we were traveling, we had the Green Book because we needed to know where we could safely stay. We needed to know where we couldn't be out when the sun went down. Even growing up in California, which was not nearly, and I'm maybe older, a little older than I look, or maybe not. But
you look gorgeous. So.
And I say all the silver up here is earned. But we knew in Stockton, California, that if you were Black, you were not going through Lodi at night. You were not going through Tracy at night. We knew the Klan was in both places and they were strong. We knew that. So we knew, get your tail home, don't go through, and they're little teeny tiny towns out, it's grown a lot since I was a kid. But that meant, if you were coming from Sacramento, don't take that highway, take that highway. right? Because it's not safe to go that way.
Wow.
But the concept of wokeness during that time, it was basically keep your head on a swivel, stay woke, keep your eyes open, stay alert, because you can be in peril and not even know it just because of where you are and what
Yeah.
time it is.
You know,
So they think being woke is having this militant attitude and a very pro-black, or I guess now they've equated wokeness with a pro-gay, or being an ally to any group of marginalized people. If you would take, but they can't, if you would take a couple of hours to sit down and understand,
yes.
if you would work on
Yes.
developing a little bit of cultural competence.
Yes.
But to do that, you cannot do that if you have hate in your heart.
My goodness. You know, I'm sorry, guys, you got to excuse me. I'm just really enjoying myself on this podcast. You know, I have been saying this, we have been saying this, you know, especially in the world of education, it's all about love, and it's all about how we're expressing love to students in a healthy manner. How can you truly love a child if there's a seed of hate in your heart? Now, my question is, how do they get rid of this hate, especially if it's been learned or traced down? I don't know. I don't get like the hatred. I don't get some of the biases and the racism and the prejudices. I just don't get it. And I'm trying to understand it, and it's just no solution. Like, I just cannot come to
that's because you are a reasonable person. So it doesn't make sense that people would have that type of hate in their heart. And I hate to say, it pains me to say, but it also keeps me very focused on the work that I need to continue to do, that I do see that in, and I'm going to call them teachers, and I'll tell you why. I see that in some teachers, and I see that in some administrators. I do not see it in educators and school leaders. And I use those terms very, very specifically.
Oh, please elaborate.
So, and it comes from, you can read it in the introduction to my upcoming book in the fall.
You know, you have to give us, you got to give us the information. Pre-order.
Absolutely. Follow me on social, on every channel. I am at Almitra Berry. As I said, that name my daddy gave me, I can't hide from anybody. I'm not on Twitter or X or whatever that thing is. I got off of there because that got ugly. But if you look for at Almitra Berry, I will be teasing and introducing and doing some stuff on the book. Anyhow, where was I? Oh, the hate.
Yeah.
Personally, growing up where I did, because it was a very multicultural community, and I do write and talk quite a bit about growing up where my friends, if I just think back to the block I lived on as a child back on Sutter Street, where I can still see down the block, they were white, Latino, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Black. We were America, so to speak, right? We were all welcomed in each other's houses.
Yes.
Didn't matter whose mother caught you messing up. It
Yes.
didn't matter what color that mother was that caught you messing up. They would correct you and let your parents know what you were doing. So I never had, and I don't want to call it an opportunity. I never had a chance to develop hate against a group of people because of the color of their skin or what they believed in, how they worshiped, what they ate, what language they spoke. People were people. But at the same time, I will caution people who, especially white people who say, I don't see color. If you don't see color, you don't see me, you don't see my experience.
Right.
The way that we get past a lot of that hate is to truly get to know and feel the experience of people of color. Not as an experiment.
Wow.
But from a genuine place of seeking to understand and be a better person because I care about the humanity of other people.
You know, and that's the thing is, I think we have to start questioning, do our leaders have a genuine spot in their heart to want to learn, to want to make a difference, especially when the children are in front of them, whether they're an educator or an administrator, district person, are they really willing? Because like you'll see, like I've seen the subjectivity of certain, like gleaning towards your culture, having a preferred bias towards your culture. Oh, look at it, so cute. Oh my God. Look at those eyes, look at that hair, look at that,
Mhm.
but then you see another culture and it's like this feeling of disdain, of disgust, and it's just like they sometimes it's just like, do we make room to get to know other cultures? So I would love for you to speak on this as well.
I start with culture as a foundation to all of my work. The first chapter in my book is about culture. How do you create a culture in your classroom? The first step on my framework of equitable instruction is cultural awareness and cultural connectedness. Because if you don't have that, you cannot choose content that's appropriate for your children because you don't give a rat's spit about who your children really are. You won't use proper methods to address the needs of your children because, again, you don't know who they are, or you don't care who they are. And so around it goes. Everything you do is tainted by any bias that you have. And I always say we all have bias, all
Yes,
of us.
we do.
Having bias is normal,
Yep.
right? It's what I use the example, it's what attracts me to my husband, right? I'm biased for his personality most of the time. But definitely, when we think about our typically when we're attracted to people, it's something physically about them that you find attractive, right? That
Right.
is a bias. It's an implicit bias. We were programmed, and I'm going to talk about Black folks for a second because I've always been Black. It's the
And
only
happy Black
experience I
History
know.
Month, right?
Right. It is. Well, I call it Black Futures Month because we
like
want to
that.
stop just looking in the past, but
Yes.
look at excellence towards the future and getting our
Beautiful.
kids ready for that future. I wish I thought it up. I didn't. It comes from my alma mater, University of California, Davis, and their Black affinity group there. Bias is normal. We all have it. Some bias is okay. Bias is not okay when it harms other people.
Right. That's right.
So you have to work on creating a culture that is warm, that's welcoming, that acknowledges, affirms, values, and respects every single child that walks in your classroom. And if you cannot do that, you don't belong in a classroom.
So then,
or school or district office.
Can you help us understand the difference then with people, in particular, when you're in a situation, say it's a school environment and it's like that only Black child or that only Spanish, that only Asian child? How do you go from, say, maybe tokenism to inclusivity? What advice do you have for leaders with that?
And I'll say I have been that only child. When I was in elementary school, well, there were two of us. There was me and my sister, who was 4 years younger. So there were two Black kids in this school. That was it. And some of us, for good reason, our parents wanted to get us out of certain neighborhoods and environments. Our parents wanted more for us. So they made those shifts, that move when they could, once redlining was gone, to get us out of that neighborhood. And my mother made that choice. But it was uncomfortable often to be the only one who looked like me in a classroom. And when I see that child in a school, it breaks my heart a little bit. I just want to connect to them and talk to them. Right now, I'm seeing a classroom I walked into a couple of years ago, and it was a very white school district. And I'd gone through this whole elementary school, and I saw one brown-skinned, probably Latina girl. And during COVID, they still had the mask on and everything, but I saw her look at me. And the way she looked at me, there was just something calling out from her.
Yeah.
So I gave her the biggest smile I could. I pulled my mask down, I made eye contact, and I went and chatted with her for just a second. And I could see her whole body language change. And the administrator that was with me, the assistant superintendent, said, I don't know what happened, but I could see something change in her. And I said, when's the last time she saw a person of color in this district?
The power of representation.
Yeah. And it didn't matter that I was Black and she was brown. It was another person of color.
Yes.
For me,
Wow.
that little extra is that I can speak Spanish. And so when I see those children and they seem to be very alone, we have just a little conversation in Spanish, and there's that little bit of extra connection for them. If we care about kids, if we really care about them, I'm going to say, I keep seeing grit over your shoulder, right? It's okay. It's good to have grit, but we shouldn't have to lean so heavily into our grit that it weathers us day in
Wow.
and day out as children just going to school. We should
Yeah.
not have that wear and tear on our bodies, in our bodies, because we have grit and tenacity. That
Right.
is not fair. It's not equitable.
It's not.
It
It
is
is.
a bias. When I define equity, I
Wow.
say it's having no bias against or favoritism for any group, no
Wow.
group. That means I am not biased towards my own. Can I have a personal feeling of knowing what Black excellence is and should be and promoting that? Absolutely. It doesn't mean that I value excellence in other cultures any less, but I know that we need to work in my own. When I
Right.
have opportunity to work with other cultures, I was the teacher that had or educator. When I taught high school one year, I was the faculty advisor for the Vietnamese club because they had
Wow.
no representation,
Yeah.
and they came to me and asked me to be their faculty advisor because they couldn't have a group without it, and there was no one on campus. There was
Wow.
not a single Southeast Asian teacher in that high school. I learned so much about Vietnamese culture. I could understand a little bit of the language, but just being around the people, they were warm and they were welcoming. That is the type of thing we need to do as educators, to step out of just who we are and be the educator our children need us to be. Get that representation for them. You don't have to look like them to represent them. You
Wow.
have to care for them and who they are. And that's why I always say value, affirm, and respect.
Wow. Speaking of, representation and having the only one, you talked about even work that you do in curriculum.
Mhm.
I think there's a shortage of representation in curriculum of
Yeah.
diverse authors.
Yeah.
And if there is diverse authors, there's a turnaround of them. They're not really cherished, I don't think, at the level that they could be. So can you talk to us maybe about your experience, and maybe your opinions, or your just what you kind of have concluded regarding the
Sure.
issue of representation, and maybe some advice for publishing leaders?
Yeah. Well, I always say I'm fortunate that I do get to work with publishing companies, and interestingly enough, not the one I worked for 16 years, but their competitors, who've been wise enough to call me in. Interestingly enough, those publishers that I work with, the people who are calling me in, the editors or product development managers, whoever the person is, whatever that term is, the person who's over developing that content, has never been a person of color, but they have been allies. They are
Yeah.
allies that recognize, paraphrasing what one of them said, when we open this book and we look at the front matter from the prior copyright, we don't see anyone in our authorship that's a person of color. And we know that's wrong. And we know we have to change it. Now, sometimes they can't change it. There are certain curricula that's been developed and copyrighted, or trademarked, where that authorship team, because it's something that they crafted and created, they cannot change. They can't just swap them out for somebody else because they don't know the method. They haven't done the years of research on that methodology. But where they can bring people in is to do things like I do, for science, because I am not a science person. That is not my area of expertise. But I could read the lessons and look at the activities and what they were asking children to do and say, you can't say that. You're making assumptions here. Not every child. I live in a high rise in downtown Houston. There aren't any little kids going out riding their bicycles after school. It's not safe. So to make assumptions that every child who reads this book lives this very white European middle class suburban life is wrong. So we have to look at everything that's in there. That's the fun stuff that I get to do with content. So they can't always swap them out. But when you're reviewing curriculum, I always tell people, don't skip straight to the lessons. Look at the front matter. Who did the authorship? Who's the authorship team? Where did those people come from? Where were they educated? Because they might all be white, but if they're all white and from Minnesota is very different than maybe they're all white, but they represent different areas of the country or different countries, or they're well traveled. You don't know until you start reading about them. Look to see whether or not they had someone review their content for equity. I always say, and if you find my picture in the front matter, you're probably safe, right? Or someone who
right.
probably
like
safe.
you, like.
Yes, someone who looks like me, you're probably safe. But there are people who look like you and me who are still stuck on a plantation and they don't recognize who they are.
Wow. That part is powerful. I think you just went somewhere with that. You just whoo. So for those stuck on the plantation, what do you do? What do you do to support them?
You know, I try to, and I probably make more of an effort to connect and talk with them and find out why they are where they are than I do with anyone else, because I always wonder what happened to you that you cannot see who you are and who your people are and how you cannot relate to their experience or how you can diminish their experience or deny their experience, because at some point in time, you had it. You had it. I think about, I had a group I worked with, a system over the last couple of years. And very early on in one of the first meetings, there was a Latina woman in there. And since then, I've, in coming to know her, just a wonderful person, absolutely love her. But she said she had never had a racialized experience. And I said, really? So you own that, right? But we were fortunately able to work together very, very with this one group. It was like this startup group and moving their whole system towards equity. And I got to work with them at a very deep level. And she came to me and she said, Doc, you know what? After your I worked together with them for 3 days and then they had some time out and I came back a few weeks later and she said, when I first was with you, I said I never had a racialized experience. She said, after our first 3 days of training, I started to look at things differently. Mm-hmm. And she said, I started to see all the other things that people were saying that they were experiencing. She said, I saw the racism. I heard the microaggressions in my office that I had let slide forever. She said, now I see it. So I think that there is a willing blindness or perhaps an extreme naivete. And if you want to talk about woke, that is a person who has not been awakened yet. They have not had the recognition. They are living in a state of specific ignorance to what is really going on around them.
Wow.
And you might say ignorance is bliss, but it can also get you killed.
That's very powerful and very, very real. Not only, physically, but also career and cause stress. Mm-hmm. And I think, so how can we then, as people in the BIPOC community who really advocate for equitable practices and advocate for students of all backgrounds, leaders of all backgrounds, how can we continue to, I guess, kind of push forward together, whether it's a movement or an idea? I went to a visit in Tennessee. I saw some things about Dr. Martin Luther King, and when I was there, I went and visited the whole scenery there, and they talked about racism, and they talked about liberation, and I felt like that was like, okay, we can start there, but then there's like, what advice do you have for people that's like, I don't even know where to start? Like, I know, like, I want equity and I want to do something to kind of stream into something more,
Mhm.
but I want to make sure that I'm protected and that I can have the support backing me as I do this. So what advice do you have for people? Um,
So one thing, and I say this to everyone who does this work and everyone who wants to take care of yourself. You have to engage in self care because this work will age you, wear you out, weather you, give you a heart attack, high blood pressure, wrinkles, none of those things that any of us want. So take
Whew.
care of yourself. The second thing I say is that no one can, there's racism, but no one can sue you for or erase your own cultural awareness and connectedness. They can't take that away from you once you have it. So develop it and let that be your guide to how you approach everything that you come to. Protect yourself. I always tell people, I know I might get you all fired up, riled up, and you're ready to go out and do something. Don't lose your job.
Yeah.
Don't lose your job. Don't put your livelihood at risk. I think the most when you're not sure where do I start or I kind of want to do this, I don't know what to do. Maybe you just don't yet have that enough of that fire. So what is the catalyst? And I will say that even after doing what I've been doing all these years, I guess it was 2 years ago now, my husband and I finally made it to DC to the National Museum of African American History and
Yes.
Culture.
Very nice.
And we spent 2 full days going through there.
Wow.
2 full days. And at the end of those 2 days, sat in the reflection room and cried
Yeah.
because there is so much that you will take in. And that's why I tell people take 2 days. We're going back. We're going to take another 2 days. Take the time to sit in that stuff that's
Mm.
there, to not just walk by and glance and read a thing or two, but to very intentionally. And what's flashing in my head right now is the wall where there are the bonds that were the currency that was backed by Black enslaved bodies. Sit in that and think about every advantage that you've had if you're white and there's this or of anything really, but white people who will hear other white people say, I didn't own slaves, I didn't do it, and not understanding that the bank that your money is sitting in right now, the bank that backs your payroll, that probably covered the mortgage on your parents' house and your grandparents' house, that those things were built on the bodies of enslaved Black people who could not bank, who could not have currency, who could not have property. I don't know how you can spend time in that place and come out and think everything's okay. That, and I think there needs to be no, nothing can equal that. Our experiences as people of color in this country is different depending on what color your skin is. Even within the Black community, what is the hue of that skin tone, right? Because we got some
Yeah.
serious issues with colorism amongst ourselves,
Colorism. That's the
right?
word. Yeah.
There should be an equivalent museum for Native American peoples, for the first Americans in this country.
Yes.
There should be one for the Latino experience. And I don't say Hispanic because that is connected to Spain. And most people don't know that the largest group of Black folks outside the continent of Africa is not in the United States, it's in Brazil. We got more cousins down there than you can shake a stick at. They are not Spanish speaking, they are Portuguese speaking. They are not Hispanic. Hispanic is a made up term that the American government created to do the census.
Wow.
Right? When we start to know all of these things, when we start to understand not just our own history, but the history of all people of color in this country and all the children that are here. I think of my Southeast Asian kids. I was in middle school when Saigon fell, and we started bringing Vietnamese refugees into this country. And so I remember Don was one of my new friends in middle school who was part of the boat lift, right? So this Vietnamese kid, brilliant, spoke 3 languages,
Wow.
but that's not how we saw them. He spoke English, French, and Vietnamese in middle school, fluently, all 3.
Amazing.
But we dismiss people because of their experience without looking at who they are and their innate abilities. So go to that museum, find your why, find that thing that just pisses you off to where I cannot just sit in the comfort of my own home or go and do my job and then just leave. I have to do more. I have to do more.
And I think that this also cultivates grit of being able to say, I'm going to take the grit that it needs now that I have that fire under me because I found something that struck a nerve in my life. I'm now going to find my why and package it, and serve others. And I think that the work that you're doing is very noble. And I look up to you. I honor what you do. I honor your work. I'm thankful for your space, that you exist, and that you're really making a difference and that you've touched so many. And so, with that said, I know I have to wrap up the show, but Dr. Almitra, how can we reach you? For those that are wanting to contact you, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, sure. First, I'm not in Stockton. I am from Stockton.
I apologize.
That's okay. No, gotta rep my old hometown. I actually live in Houston, Texas, but you can find me. I always tell people social media. LinkedIn is the one. LinkedIn is the one channel where you will get an immediate response. The others, the content is out there, but not. It's not monitored as quickly. Yeah. info@alberryinc.com. Will get you right to me. If you go to bookdrberry.com, my website for booking, there's a link there. You'll get a link to book 30 minutes or just request some more information. But like I said, with this name, I'm hard to find. You Google me, Bing me, Yahoo me, whatever it is. You look up Almitra Berry. Sooner or later, you're gonna find me. It won't take long. It won't take long.
Well, this has been wonderful. And again, a high honor to have you on the show. I hope that the listeners have been able to learn something and will be willing to book you and willing to partner with you on various endeavors across this nation. So with that said, thank you so much, Dr. Berry, for joining us on the Grit and Equity podcast. And until next time, guys, I will tune in with you. I will keep in touch. Looking forward to seeing you guys. I don't know, Dr. Berry, if you have any events coming up or anything that you want to put out there besides, I know, your book. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us?
I don't think I do right now.
Okay. Well,
follow me on social. It'll be there.
Follow her on social. Okay. And do not forget to look at her book, pre-order her book. It is going to be amazing. And I also am hoping to see some of you guys in the near future, whether that's in Maryland or if that is at CMC Central and whatnot. We are both here for you guys. So thank you so much for joining us on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.